This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Hi everybody, welcome to my live. I'm going to be reposting this one also as a video podcast. So I wanted to talk about workhorse men. I realize that I do a lot of posts about workhorse men and videos, but I've never done a full-length podcast on the Dr. Psych Mom Show, which is my podcast, and you could listen on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else. And so I just did a subscriber episode on people-pleasing daughters of covertly narcissistic mothers. So when a girl is a parentified child, she usually turns into a people-pleaser. And somebody requested that I do that one as a podcast, and that is going to be a subscriber podcast that's coming out in the beginning of April. And so basically, a workhorse man is the equivalent of a people-pleasing woman. And what the type of childhood that relates to a workhorse man, that creates one, is one where there's a lot of emphasis on service and duty and very little emphasis on pleasure. So the guy's male role model does not seem to be happy. And honestly, the mother usually doesn't either. Nobody really seems to be happy in this home. It's about religious obligations, family obligations, making money, providing, etc. And there's very little affection in the home between the parents. Often, the children get their hugs and what have you, but it's not like a home where there's a lot of open discussion, not a lot of open communication. The man learns that even as a child, you're supposed to sublimate your needs, you're supposed to not make a problem, etc. Sometimes, by the way, so that's one type of home, is when there's not a lot of affection, it's mostly duty, obligation. Another way a man learns to be a workhorse is when one or both parents is an alcoholic or very depressed, or in some way he has to become a parentified child and he has to take care of the parent. So often I see, let's say the father left, the mother is an alcoholic. So then the guy learns from a very young age, this is more common in oldest children, to be this workhorse mentality of either gender, people-pleasing woman or a workhorse guy. So the guy then from childhood, he has to take care of his mother. So she's either depressed or she has an alcohol problem, or maybe she has borderline personality. Either way, he is the man of the house, and so he has obligations before the usual age. Often, if they're in poverty, he gets a job too. Like he can do his newspaper route, or he can work construction jobs, or he can do something because he actually has to provide. So he learns to provide even very early on. In other houses where there's more money, he doesn't provide, but in fact he emotionally provides. He's the emotional rock for the mother, sometimes the father. He listens to these sad stories of these troubled people, his parents, and he resolves that if he's ever in a marriage, and he doesn't think that, sometimes he thinks it, but often it's not articulated, if he ever gets into a marriage, he's going to protect his wife from feeling any pain, and he'll protect his children from feeling any pain, so that nobody's ever in the position that he's in where he feels so burdened. So frequently, things are going okay. The man falls in love, and that's always a welcome respite to every to everyday life, dopamine, adrenaline. I've discussed the honeymoon stage ad nauseum, right? And what happens here is that he's in love. Finally, a woman is meeting his needs to some degree. But remember, he's going to pick either a difficult or an avoidant person because that's what he knows from home. But in the honeymoon stage, everybody's more lovey-dovey. Then the physical intimacy dries up in later marriage. She turns to focus on the kids. And he does not have any language for asking to get his needs met. And he often picked somebody who isn't comfortable with him having needs because he didn't have any at the beginning of the relationship. They were just both in this happy honeymoon stage. They were having more sex, doing more lovey-dovey activities. But this man often gets either an avoidant woman who's kind of very emotionally reserved, which is in the first case, the first upbringing that I described, it would match that. Or it's a depressive or anxious or substance addicted or, has PTSD, a woman with some big mental and emotional issue so that he is kind of in that caretaker role. So either they're like ships in the night or he's in the caretaker role. Those are the two paths for the workhorse man. Now, sometimes this becomes unsustainable. He has something like a nervous breakdown or an epiphany or a midlife crisis frequently. And a nervous breakdown, but he doesn't miss any days at work. So it's like a little quiet little nervous breakdown. And so he decides, wait, is this all that life is? I never do anything I want to do. What do I even want to do? And then he comes into therapy. And then he decides that he doesn't want this anymore. He doesn't want a life that's only based on service to others. Sometimes the kids become teenagers and then they start acting like, jerks. And then really even like the close relationship he had with the kids, it feels like that's kind of screwed. And at that point, that midlife workhorse comes into therapy and he decides that he wants to work on actually enjoying his life. Hi, Shurya. You can always comment, by the way, even though I am talking about a specific topic, you can ask questions about this or anything else, the workhorse topic or anything, and I'll answer them later. So anyway, at this juncture in midlife, the workhorse man, he realizes, that life should not only be about unrelenting misery and providing for others. And, sometimes he goes down a bad path, right? Sometimes he starts drinking, using porn, saying, I'm just going to get those fleeting little dopamine hits where I can. And sometimes he looks at his marriage and he's like, you know what? This person never really cared about me. It was just what I could provide. In therapy, he would learn, well, shit, that's what I was offering. So like, no blame, but I want something different. And so these are the situations, these are the men, ironically, that are the ones who leave, because yes, more often women do leave, not as often as that 70% statistic, which is about who files, which is usually who does the paperwork. But a lot of times these men will have a midlife crisis, midlife awakening, and they'll be like, I don't want to live this life anymore. I want to be in a different dynamic in a healthier relationship. Thank you. Sure, you liked my sweater. Thanks. So then these workhorse men, sometimes they get into couples therapy though. And then you can try to reimagine. Couples therapy, never regular therapy work without going back into family of origin. So whether you're an individual or couples therapy, if you're not looking at these earliest patterns, then you end up with a guy who like turns to his wife and he's like, you never cared about me, you blah, 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 blah. But he doesn't say like, and I never thought I should be cared about because of how I was raised, So it's who I picked. You're who I picked. It echoed everything that I knew. Confirmation bias. A woman who repudiates my needs that I wasn't, by the way, admitting that I had any or even cognizant that I had any. Well, that makes sense given how I was raised, and maybe we can together, you and I as a couple, figure out a different path instead of the blame game. When it doesn't go back into family of origin, couples therapy just becomes a blame game. You did this, I did this. You did that, I did that, right? Victoria says, do workhorse men tend toward depression or people-pleasing tendencies, rigidity? Yeah, all of those. I mean, it's the equivalent. So the people-pleasing, you asked me to do the people-pleasing daughters podcast, Victoria, and I said earlier on, I scheduled that one for April. But the equivalent of the people-pleasing daughters of narcissistic mothers is this, the workhorse man. It's just I'm just calling it different by gender. You could say it's a workhorse woman and a people-pleasing man, but I'm using the terms that I used from the beginning. And the workhorse men, sometimes they can be rigid, but often they just kind of sublimate what they need, and they go along with the schedule, they go along with the paradigm. They often do tend toward depression, but they don't realize that until midlife. They just think that life isn't for fun, you know, just like the women do that are the people pleasers. They just think, oh, I'm here so that everybody else has a good time. I facilitate the life experience of others. Others self-actualize because of me, my financial provisions, my day-to-day provisions, my taking care of the home, taking care of everything. Right? And so they don't even think like that they are a part of the subset of people who's supposed to enjoy life. They're in a different bucket of people who are supposed to facilitate. It's like a teacher going to school and saying, like a kindergarten teacher saying, am I going to learn to share today? Am I going to enjoy snack time? Am I going to like these songs? Doesn't matter, right? It matters what the children like, and you are there to cultivate self-development in the children, right? But if the kindergarten teacher then went home and then thought, what does my husband want, and what do my kids want, and what does my mom who's calling want, and then on the weekend, what does my sister need, and what is this, then she's a people pleaser, right? Because it's not just at work that she would be focused on the facilitation, on the the growth of other people. It's everywhere. She never thinks about her needs. And the male equivalent to that is the workhorse. At work, he thinks, what does my boss need? What does my coworker need? Even what does my secretary need? They're managing up, managing down, managing the clients, managing everything. And then they go home and they say, what does my wife need? What does my kid need? What does my mom who's calling me need? What do my friends need? What does the communities association need? Like everything. So these are people who are basically, they're not created to have any self at all. At home, as I said in the beginning, which you said you came late, it's either a disconnected home or where nobody really feels like any pleasure, and the child sees that basically life is just obligation and duty, or else it's a home where the child is in service to a parent's personality disorder or depression or addiction or whatever else. They're expected to take care of the parent emotionally and or physically, sometimes even financially as they get older, and that is their role. Their role is to facilitate others' self-actualization through their work and their effort. And often, as I said, in therapy is when things are going to change, because this person becomes so miserable and so depressed that they realize that this is not sustainable. And they frequently come in saying things like, I am going to have a nervous breakdown, or I just cannot deal with this marriage anymore, or they have some sort of epiphany that for other people, life is not so terrible. And you know what? Often when the parent dies, the parent who created the problem, and that parent had their own problems, obviously. Their childhood was no picnic, and they probably did better than what they got at home. But when the parent who the child was always in service to dies, sometimes that can be free up some space in their mind to say, oh my gosh, I can actually go into therapy and talk openly about my childhood, whereas before I would have felt disloyal or like I was throwing my parents under the bus. So that's a real common time. And that, of course, death of a parent often happens in midlife. That's just how old you are. And so at that juncture, it can be freeing. If you had a narcissistic parent, it can be freeing. That's like a big taboo thing to admit. But for many of my clients, it's relieving when that person passes, because they can no longer be calling you, expecting you to do stuff, guilt tripping you. You don't have to hear the sad stories, the litany of grievances and victimization narratives anymore. So that is basically the overview of workhorse men. And as I said, frequently they are married to either avoidant women or women who struggle mightily with their mental health. These are the men who, quote, do everything, but it's like a big secret. So they work and then they come home and then they do everything at home while the woman sits on her phone. And it's not like she's trying to be bad, but she has depression, she has mental health issues, whatever. He'll never point it out, because his role, again, is just to facilitate. So like this man is usually an enabler, frequently he's ignoring his wife's drinking every night, or he's ignoring that she's so depressed, or she has some issue like chronic pain, and he conveniently ignores that she does everything else except have sex with him with the chronic pain, and so this guy is used to really pushing his needs under the rug. He doesn't even know he has any needs, and it's the equivalent of the woman raised in the same scenario. These type of people never get with each other. Sometimes in a second marriage they do. That's kind of funny. In a second marriage, if they've not really been to therapy, sometimes two enablers get together and then they like bond over complaining about their exes, and they're usually still managing and co-parenting and doing everything with their exes. So they'll sit there and they'll hate each other's exes and they'll have, pity parties, but they at least have a common enemy. They are both the person who does everything with the exes. And if you don't look inward, then you don't even try to get out of that enabling dynamic, but at least they're not doing it in the primary relationship, and so that is something that I've seen before. Ideally, though, you work on yourself such that you're comfortable with having needs and being a person and having preferences, and also so that you can model being a full human being for your kids, right? Because a lot of these guys, they're like, my father, what did he like? What did he do? I don't know. He just sat, he went to work and then he sat on the couch. He drank, or like he sometimes wasn't there at all, physically or mentally. But, usually these guys, they do not have a role model of a man who enjoys his life. So that can frequently be very motivating for them to go deeper and get outside their comfort zone in therapy, because they want to show their son and their daughter an example of like a happy adult. And I do have a podcast, Your Child Deserves to See a Happy Adult. What if you don't know what this looks like? And it talks about people that are raised in these kinds of situations. So if anybody has any more questions, I will answer those now before I have to go to my next client. I do have a great seminar. It's coming up on Friday for ADHD husbands and anxious wives. That specific dynamic, which is very common, of guys with ADHD and women with anxiety. So definitely sign up for that. It's all over my page. If you go to my page, or you could always email me, Samantha@drpsychmom.com, if you want to schedule therapy or coaching with me or anybody at my practice, or if you want to sign up for that seminar. Shoria says, other than medication, what are the top ways to combat ADHD? I'm guessing working out and eating clean. I mean, medication does help a lot. Also, people use exercise as a dopamine release. You're trying to release a bunch of adrenaline and create some sort of natural stimulation in your brain. I will talk about this a lot in my seminar, but that's how your brain is, I mean, you're not going to fix it long term. A lot of people find with coaching that they can figure out different strategies, such as putting everything in your Google Calendar, having lists, having reminders, having the same routine all the time. A lot of the change with ADHD comes from medication, but the main thing that even predates the medication definitionally is admitting that you have ADHD and admitting. So, for example, kids in middle school and high school with ADHD, their grades tank when they get to that age because they're not really admitting it yet that there's a problem. They just assume that they're like their friends who just somehow get homework done, and then they won't admit that they won't do that, without a million reminders and sitting at the kitchen table and body doubling and having your and timing yourself and making deadlines and all these different things that you could Google or figure out with an ADHD coach. But point being is that the strategy is you're always trying to make a deadline. You're always trying to give yourself a reward. You're always trying to, you're waking up your understimulated brain, and when people don't admit that they have ADHD, then they won't do that stuff. So guys with ADHD will frequently miss things like their anniversary or asking about their wife's job interview or something until they admit that there's somebody who has to write stuff down every single time. So they literally, when she says, I have a job interview Friday, they have to write down 12 p.m., ask about job interview. And you won't do that. It hurts your pride to do that unless you fully accept and admit that you have ADHD, right? So that's really the big part that therapy helps with, because a lot of people with ADHD had a tough road. When they were a kid, the teachers seemed to be against them, parents seemed to be against them. The reality was they were extremely difficult, right, to deal with. But you know, they got sometimes a victim narrative. And sometimes they were victimized. Sometimes literally it used to be that like those would be the kids who would get hit at school and at home, you know? And so, but if you see yourself as everybody always misunderstood me and I'm fine, then that's not good. The narrative is everybody always misunderstood me. Also, I was pretty difficult because I have undiagnosed ADHD. That's a lot more objective and can help you in the world understand yourself, your friendships, work, relationships, etc. All right, I have time for one more question. If anybody has one more question.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
I think I just won my taxes.
Yeah?
I just switched to H&R Block in about 1 minute. All I had to do was drag and drop last year's return into H&R Block, and bam, my information is automatically there.
So I don't have to go digging around for all my old papers to switch?
Nope.
Sounds like we just leveled up our tax game.
Switching to H&R Block is easy. Just drag and drop your last return. It's better with Block.
And as I said, we hired a male psychologist. This is wonderful news, by the way. Dr. Thomas Ballas is now at my practice. He is licensed through SIPACT, which is our interstate reciprocity agreement. So he works with everybody in like 41 states, same as I can. And he's great. A lot of people have asked for a male. He works with couples. He works with individuals. So if you're interested in Dr. Ballas, then again, email me. You could email the practice, info@bestlifebehavioralhealth.com, or me directly, Samantha@drpsychmom.com, or you could just look on my page, all the things that I discuss. If you scroll down my newsfeed, you will see the announcement about Dr. Ballas. You'll see my seminar. You'll see everything, but you can always reach out as well. And I hope that you guys join my secret Facebook group, Best Place on the Internet, $4.99 a month. And that's most of where I engage, because the main page is filled with trolls, if you have not seen that. And it is not a hospitable environment for human life. So instead, join the secret group, which only that tiny paywall really eliminates a lot of the people who just come to argue. Shoria said, male therapist seems to be more in demand. See, Shoria, it's not, though. That's the thing, is like, that's why we don't have any at my practice, because every time I try to hire one, you know, people are all like, oh, I really want a male. And then it turns out all the men want to talk to women. You know why? Because men like to talk to women. But I have high hopes for Dr. Ballas, because he is a licensed psychologist. He knows his shit. He is a smart guy. So, you know, I really do have high hopes. But you would think that, you know, that men want to talk to men. Men want to talk to women. You know who women want to talk to? Women. But, and I've tried this for years now already. But the point is that hopefully the people who follow Dr. Psychmom are smart enough to realize that no matter what the gender is, it's the training and the person and their experience. So check out his page. He has active military experience as well, by the way, which is the one thing that seems to impress men. Shoria says, I took your advice to hire an opposite gender therapist. Yeah, definitely. If you have, by the way, women should work with Dr. Ballas. If you have issues with men, if you're one of those women that's like, oh, all men suck, you can have a corrective emotional experience with a male therapist. You know, just like men can have a corrective emotional experience with a female therapist. And I have a whole podcast on when you should get the same gender, different gender, what have you. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Oh, one more question. Oh, no, just a nice compliment. This guy says, thank you. I really appreciate your topics and get a lot out of it. The things you say make a lot of sense and actually help to clarify things I see. Thank you very much. Always glad to be of service. And have a great day, guys. It's the beginning of a week. Godspeed. It's going to be a long week, as it is all weeks. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.